Guy released last Friday into theaters. It was directed by Sean Levy and stars Ryan Reynolds, Jodie Comer, Taika Waititi, and Joe Keery. The movie follows a video game background NPC named Guy, who begins to think that there is more to his life than what he sees, and that he should try to be the good guy rather than just a background character. I just want to give a warning that this will not contain spoilers, but I will discuss the basic plot and shots from the trailer, and I will vaguely discuss minor plot points. So if you want to go into the movie completely blind, I would recommend watching the movie and then come back, but there will be no spoilers in this review. I was really excited for this movie. I'm a huge fan of Ryan Reynolds. I think he's one of the best comedic actors in the business right now, and I was very intrigued by the plot. I did have my concerns though, mainly stemming from how they would handle the love dynamic between Guy and Millie, considering he is a video game character and she is a human. Before I get into how I think they handled the issue without spoilers, and how I think they handled the great premise and so much more, please remember to like and subscribe, and follow DM Reviews on Twitter. Links should be in the description. Also, don't forget to check out Demerit Commissions in the Discord server below for great thumbnails, profile pictures, phone backgrounds, and so much more. Firstly, I think I should just get this out of the way real quick. The acting in this movie is really great, just as you would expect with such a great cast. I loved Ryan Reynolds, as I would expect, but I also love Lil Rel Howery as Buddy, Guy's friend. The character was really funny, and a lot of that humor was really dependent on his great performance, and obviously he really delivered there. Taika Waititi was the only one I wasn't really a fan of, but that was really more because of how the script handled his character more than his performance. I thought he was a very weak villain whose motivations are somewhere between the lines of unclear and basic, bland, and boring. The basic plot of this movie is Guy realizing that there's more to life than the basic stuff that goes on every day, which for him is gun violence, robberies, stuff like that. And then eventually, for reasons I won't discuss, he must save his world. I thought they should have had more time at the beginning of the movie showing us why he cares for these people so much and what his daily routine is and why he loves that so much. The movie is kind of short. I think it's a tiny bit less than 2 hours, so I'm sure they had the runtime available to do this, and it would have added a lot more to later scenes where we see how desperate he is to save his city. A lot of later scenes do somewhat make up for this, considering how great a lot of one-note characters are who get one line. A lot of them are really funny and they were great ideas, just it would have added even more if we knew exactly why Guy cared about them so much and why he couldn't just sit back and watch them all go away. I can't believe I'm saying this, but I thought this movie could have been funnier. It was a very funny movie and I laughed a lot, but there were so many opportunities for other jokes and they didn't take them. As I discussed, the movie had a very short runtime, so it wasn't like they had to cut the scenes at a certain place. I felt like there were plenty of opportunities to even just include a little shot, which I think would have been a lot funnier because this movie is obviously a comedy, and I think there were just more opportunities for jokes to keep the audience laughing the entire time. Though it is still a very funny movie, so it's hard to really complain about the comedy because of just how funny it is. But there were definitely opportunities for jokes that I wish they would have taken. I'm not going to get into any of them now because they're pretty spoilery, but just basic things you would expect from a movie like this, and I wish they could have taken them then. So, as I'm sure many of you know, considering the casting information, there are several YouTubers video game YouTubers, who make little cameos in this movie, and I won't discuss how they are utilized, but I thought it was basically clever, but still shameless exposition. They needed to show how the general population is reacting to everything going on with Guy, and this was the best way they could think of. It was very funny, they did it so often. There were times when they did it well, where they would just do it for a second, but there were times they would spend probably around a minute just showing different YouTubers all saying the same thing about one thing. And there were just better ways to do this. You could have just had a character say what the audience is saying in a one-line thing, but instead they would show how everybody is thinking, which was just so unnecessary because this added a lot of unnecessary stuff. I'm not the type of person who was whoa, they can't believe they got this person in here. So that didn't really help me, but there were plenty of really funny cameos who I did not know they were in the movie. I'm not going to discuss who, but there were some actually really surprising cameos, and I was wow, I can't believe they actually got them in this movie, because I had no idea they were in it. So that was very exciting, but there were also a lot of cameos that didn't add anything to the plot at all, and they weren't even that funny. So they were just used poorly, and I kind of wish they could have handled them a bit differently. So there's a lot. This is a Disney movie, and they really utilize the other projects that Disney owns. I'm not going to discuss which ones, but they really utilize them, and they have small little fun, not even cameos, just their minor plot points, and I thought they handled them really well. It is kind of shameless cross promotion, but it was just so funny that I didn't mind. It was just cool to see this person with this stuff and then also with this stuff. I'm oh, I know that thing from that universe and then this thing from another universe. And I'm like, it's great that Disney owns all this stuff because they're able to do this, and I'm sure they didn't have to pay anybody for it. So that was all really funny, and I liked how they did that. Like, I kind of hope that more. I mean, not everything is like video game movie where you can do stuff like this, but I kind of hope that other Disney movies are just utilize the idea that they can mention their Disney's other titles without like paying any before. Like, they can just mention. I mean, Disney owns like Marvel, Star Wars, and plenty of other things. They could just talk about them without having to do anything about that. And I hope that a lot of future ones utilize that because they can be used for great comedy, which they did in Free Guy, and I hope more Disney projects do that. This movie is very well directed. A lot of times they would use very clever ways to switch from like what's going on in the real world to what's going on in the video game. So like you would have a character who appears to be like this like super strong man, and then it turns out that it's like this 4-year-old boy, or like it's just like some fat guy who lives in his mom's basement. And I thought that was really funny because it's really weird to like, because I know that that's probably very realistic, so I thought it was very funny to like see them acting like they were the strong guy and then they're just kind of like a loser. And then there was also great comedy where like whatever they say their video game character says, so you would have them like talking to somebody in the real world, but then their character would just be talking to a wall. So I thought they handled comedy very well there. But as I discussed, there were many times where I thought there was more comedy to be had that they didn't even do, and I think there was plenty of comedy here too. And it's kind of similar to Ready Player One, the movie, where they kind of showed what people actually were, even though in the video game they were something else. And I thought they handled it very well there, and I thought they could have maybe taken a lesson from them in this movie a little bit, just a little, and added a little bit more comedy there. A movie like this is very complicated because you have to handle the plot very, because there are a lot of tightropes to walk in terms of plot holes, and it kind of bothered me. Like, there were a lot of plot holes in this movie. I'm sure a lot of other movies have these, and there were ways they could have avoided them, and they just didn't. Like, there were just so many plot holes, and I kept on like, why don't they do this? Why is this happening? But it's happening differently everywhere else. Like, simple stuff like that just really bothered me because there were scenes where I could tell they wanted to have an emotional scene, so they would ask you to like suspend logic, but it just didn't work because a lot of the movie they actually do face the logic head on, and they're like, okay, well, we can't do this, even though it would probably help the movie because that's just not realistic. And I felt like the rest of the movie should have taken a lesson from the other parts of the movie, kind of. And it really bothered me, but there were plenty of times when it didn't. Just there were a few major plot holes in like the biggest scenes in the movie that really bothered me, so that was kind of annoying. So now I'm going to be getting into the spoiler section of this video, where I'm going to discuss my main flaw of the movie and what I would want in a sequel, which seems inevitable considering something which I'll discuss later. But before that, I would just like to say that I would give Free Guy around like an 8.5, I guess. It had a great premise and good execution, along with great performances and great directing, and they saved Free Guy from a lackluster villain, an underdeveloped romance, as I will discuss soon, and many, many plot holes. Alright, so now I'm going to get into spoilers, so, that's your warning. So as I discussed earlier, my main worry about this movie was how they would handle a romance between a video game character and a real human being. My main theory going into the movie was that they would reveal that Ryan Reynolds' NPC was based off a real person, and they're being held captive by Taika Waititi. Thankfully, that it's not what happened, and I like the idea a lot more that Joe Keery kind of created this character, how he was feeling, and I love the idea of that. I didn't like how they handled it. They did not do enough to create why Joe Keery loves Millie enough. Like, he's barely a character. Like, he helps Millie occasionally, but Keyes is not really a human being. Like, he's just there to help Millie occasionally and kind of discuss their history. So they should have done more, and I think the best way to do that was if they drew comparisons with him and Guy. Like, Guy seems to be a combination of who he wished he was and also how he feels. And I think if they drew comparisons between the characters before they revealed what was going on, that would have been a lot better because the romance would feel much more real. I mean, I did enjoy how they held off. I had no idea this was happening until like halfway through the movie. Eventually there is a scene where they hinted at this, and that is when I'm like, oh, yep, I know exactly what's happening. And I don't think they wanted you to know that, but it was a little too obvious. But I liked how they were willing to not reveal this for as long as they did. Like, that took guts, and I was proud of them. It also probably hurt them a little bit, considering that it stopped how much they could, develop these characters. So it hurt them, but I'm also proud that they, were willing to do that. So Ryan Reynolds tweeted that Disney has officially requested a sequel to Free Guy. I don't know exactly what that means, but I know it's doing somewhat well at the box office, so my guess is they said, oh, it's at the box office. Would you guys do a sequel? So I don't think anything's official yet, but it does seem like a sequel will be happening. So I don't really want one. This movie seems so well self-contained, and the ending was good enough that I don't think a sequel is necessary. But if it happens, I do have an idea of what it would be, or what I would want it to be. So movie ends with how the NPCs are basically like still in a video game, but they have their own free will, and they're kind of just having a great life. They can do basically whatever they want. So maybe you could have how the NPCs now, they feel like they need a greater meaning in life, and they're getting bored. And so are the players, because they need to figure something. Because, I don't think they actually do much in this game. They realize that while maybe violence isn't always the best way to have a video game, you do need some sort of goal, and maybe this game doesn't have as good of one as many violent games do. So this movie is basically about how they all need a meaning, and they need something to do. And like Millie and Keys, and I'm sure Ryan and Guy too, because they're not going to leave him out of the movie, they would need to find a way to keep the game interesting without going back to the violent roots, because they know if they can't, then they're not going to make money, and the NPCs are all going to die because they need money to keep this software on. So that was the best idea I had for a sequel, but I think the best way to go about a sequel is just not making one. I don't know how else you do a sequel, because just this movie had a very clear ending, and I don't know where you go from there. And I feel like any sequel would not be as good as this one, so I'd rather they not do one. Also, as you probably noticed, Deadpool is in the thumbnail. That was just because I noticed there was a little Deadpool Easter egg. One of the guys who they revealed what they were like in the real life had a Deadpool poster in the background, along with a Avengers one, and I think a Rick and Morty one too. So that was kind of what I was referencing with all the cross promotion stuff, but also Captain America's shield and a lightsaber and then Chris Evans being there within a minute of each other was really cool to see. I would love to see that in other things, but I thought it would be really funny if Deadpool 3 opens with Deadpool waking up and he's like, oh, I had this weirdest dream where I was a guy in a video game. That won't happen, and I don't think I would actually like it, but that would be kind of funny if that's all this movie was. So, just one idea I had, but that's all. That's really the only reason I put him there. But yeah, that's not really anything. Just thought it was kind of funny to think about. If that's how they would open Deadpool 3. So if you made it this far into the video, I'm assuming you have seen Free Guy. So make sure to comment what you thought of the movie and what your thoughts are on a potential sequel, and what you think of my idea, and if you have a different idea that you like.